Sometimes that thought Sometimes that thought escapes us and we become forgetful of it. But actually, we do have many reasons to be grateful to God. Psalm 100 verse 4 says, "Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name." It's one of the primary reasons why we are together on a Sunday morning. How about you just take a moment to think of some good thing, perhaps unexpected, a piece of kindness, which has happened to you during the past little while. Well, hopefully you've been able to remember something. And it's for those kind of reasons that we are here to give thanks to God. So the talk this morning is basically to draw upon something in the early parts of the Bible, an ancient biblical ceremony, which might give us still some clues as to how we can give thanks to God today. That ancient ceremony is called the thank offering. I'm not sure if you've heard about it. It's there. It's in the book of Leviticus, especially in its origins. And it's part of a little family of what they call peace or fellowship offerings, which people would make in the tabernacle or later in the temple. These peace offerings, of which the thank offering was one of them, were voluntary. And the offerings were very largely not taken to be burnt, not taken by the priest, but in large measure, they were given back to the person who has made the offering. And if you want to find out more about that, a few verses in Leviticus chapter 7 and verses 12 to 15 will do that for you. So here's what those verses say, that a person who wanted in a very special way to give thanks to God for some blessing, perhaps a deliverance, perhaps from some good thing unexpectedly which had come to them. They would come to the altar at, shall we say, the temple in Jerusalem for the thank offering, and would bring an animal for sacrifice. And along with it, so Leviticus says, they would bring 4 kinds of bread. I'm going to list them, but I promise not to do this again later in the service. The 4 kinds of bread are as follows: thick loaves made without yeast and with olive oil mixed in, thin loaves made without yeast and brushed with oil, thick loaves of the finest flour, well kneaded and with oil mixed in, and thick loaves of bread made with yeast. So just counting those up, there are 4 different types. And we'll come to the issue of loaves later on. And when the sacrifice was made, the priest would, of the bread, keep one of each sort which the offerer brought. That's the technical stuff done. That's the biblical instruction in the book of Leviticus. And there are 2 questions which people might have had, which remain unanswered in Leviticus, but they were answered in later tradition. Here's the first question. For what was a thanksgiving offering made? And in the later tradition, they said there are 4 kind of events for which a person should be bringing a thank offering to the Lord. Here they are. For one who has crossed the sea, for one who has crossed a desert, for one who was sick and became healed, and one who was incarcerated in captivity and became free. Now, that list probably sounds terrifically random to you, as it did when I first read it. But basically, it has its origin, not in the book of Leviticus, but in a wonderful psalm, number 107, which I might invite you to read for yourselves afterwards. Then you can see how it goes. In that Psalm 107, there are significantly 4 sections to it. And each section, which would correspond to these 4 events: crossed the sea, traversed the desert, sick and became healed, one who was in captivity and became excuse me, and became free. Those are described, and then at the end of each one it says this: let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. So, for example, at the end of one section in verses 21 and 22, it says, let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them sacrifice thank offerings and tell of his works with songs of joy. And later on in the same psalm, verses 31 and 32, let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for mankind. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders. So this begins to add to something other than is taking place in the temple, and I'll describe that in just a minute. I want to say that in a large measure, my understanding of what goes on here includes a statement by the late Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sacks as follows: that joy in the teachings of Moses is never about individuals. It is always about something we share. I need to listen to that because, you know, I've got a long way to go in thinking of joy as something other than a personal and private emotion, some kind of well-being which you want to have inside your own life. But this is a different perspective altogether. It's about something that we share with other people. It's never, says Sacks, never about individuals. It's always about something we share. This was brilliant, actually, in Mary's talk. If I heard it correctly, with a picture of that young lad with his birthday cake. And you might think, you know, that the cake is very, very large for a small boy to be eating. And it's true. The reason why a birthday cake is so large, obviously, is it's there for sharing. It's too much for one individual, and it's just there to be shared. The joy is there to be shared, just like Jonathan Sacks has said. Well, so far, I come to this sort of conclusion on the thank offering, is that we also could take a more deliberate, thoughtful, joyful, and communal approach to giving thanks to God. It's not all private, it's not all quiet. It's about joys received and joys shared. Right, we've come to the second question. That's my first stab at what were the Thanksgiving offerings made for. The second part is, what happened to the loaves? It's not said in Leviticus. All we know is that loaves of 4 sorts would be brought as a thank offering in addition to the animal. 4 kinds of bread. Each kind of bread was loaves in the plural. So the question is, how many loaves of those 4 sorts should the person bringing the offering bring? The answer is given in one of those post-biblical traditions that the minimum would be one loaf of each of the four sorts. That's 4 loaves in total. But, says the same text, the ideal number is not one of each, it is 10 of each. 10 times 4 is then 40 loaves. One of each type went to the priest, meaning that if the ideal was followed, the man who had brought the offering would still have 36 loaves to do something with. And the question is, what would that person do with 36 loaves and some meat which had to be eaten in a day? The answer is that you held a feast and you invited guests. And this feast was an opportunity for the person doing the thank offering to say something about his gratitude or her gratitude to God. It was a kind of a testimony as to the kindnesses of the Lord. It was expressed in the form of a blessing at the meal, with at least 10 people present and 2 sages, they called them, 2 religious experts. And this then was the blessing. It was, "Blessed is he who bestows acts of loving kindness." And I've written that note, and the net word "he" has a capital H in it. So it's, "Blessed is God who bestows acts of loving kindness." So the ceremony, the ancient ceremony, had 2 parts to it. The thank offering, it took place in the temple with a priest, with an animal, and with loaves of bread. And it took place afterwards in another location. And it was at a feast with invited guests, and they could then see a demonstration and be told of the kindness of the Lord in helping somebody, in delivering them. Well, that's the ancient story, and no doubt there are many ways to express gratitude to the Lord. And the ancient biblical ceremony might give us some ideas about how we could expand or broaden the ways in which we think of giving thanks to God. In those two ways, one in front of God and one giving thanks to God in front of other people at the feast. I want to go back to that phrase. How could we do our thanksgivings in a deliberate, joyful, and communal way? Of course, in these days, the temple in Jerusalem has long gone, and the sacrifices no longer take place, but Thanksgiving still goes on. And maybe we could consider how we could do our thanksgiving to God when we gather together on a Sunday morning. We can express our thanks to God through prayer. We can tell one another our stories, the reasons why we want to give thanks to God for his kindnesses, and we could invite others to share our joy by eating with us. We have a great thing, both in the ceremony of worship on a Sunday and also in that little after event in the South Hall, where we normally meet, and it's partly for social reasons, but it's also partly celebration of the goodness of God to us. The thing I notice in final terms about the ceremony is that all these elements at the altar and in the dining room, with the sacrifice and with the words of thanksgiving, and then later on with the food shared, these are all part of the same one whole. Let me close then, and after this I'll hand back to Sylvia with those same words, which is given in the early form of the blessing for Thanksgiving at the Thanksgiving meal. It was, "Blessed is he who bestows acts of loving kindness." Amen. And over to Sylvia.
Our prayers are with you for your healing. You sound as if you've got a nasty cough there, part of COVID. So bless you, we'll pray for your healing. Now Jeremy has asked Sutin read to us, but to do this responsively. So respond with the type, the bold type, as opposed to the ordinary type. Okay. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving, and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name. For the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues to all generations. Amen. Now we have the offering here, and I haven't given a prayer for that yet, so I'll do that now. Father, help us to be generous givers, both of our money and our lives, that we might make a difference in this